so why don't we get started? And hopefully Paul and Tom Kennebec will join us soon. Okay, this is the regular monthly Town of Woodbridge Board of Finance meeting for Thursday, February 18th, 2021. And the first item on the agenda is public comments. Are there any public comments, Karen?
Only one was the email from Bill Silverberg.
Okay. I don't have, do we have to read that?
They either read it or at least give the sort of an idea of the.
I don't have it. I don't know what I did with it.
Well, I think for the, it's already, I read it. I assume everybody read it. I think we just have to make sure that it's part of the minutes and in the record.
Okay. Okay.
I assume everybody else read it.
I read it.
I did too.
There you go.
All right. Item 2, Administrative Officer, Tony.
Hello there. I report for you through January. It is a slight surplus of $43,000, which means that our projected decrease of fund balance on this report would be $350,000 at the end of the year. There's been some significant updates since we've done this. I did this report, which I will fill you in on. But just to go through this report, taxes are actually doing well, and actually we probably would have a slight surplus in taxes. I'm guessing. I want to see how many what we get in from the deferral program, which was accepted by a slightly less number than in July, roughly $200,000, and in July it was a little more. But we collected it all then, and I would anticipate we'll collect it all now. So the tax is actually coming in well, doing well, and we in the budget project a slight decrease in our tax collection rate. So intergovernmental revenue is a surplus of $100,000. We did receive $163,000 in coronavirus relief and FEMA funds related to COVID-19, and those were costs from FY20. So most of that is will be added to our fund balance to offset those FY20 costs that we had. We did use some of that for some cleaning and a few things, so not the entire amount. But our investment income is doing poorly, and is about a deficit of about $130,000. And finally, our department charges should have a slight deficit of about $30,000. We do have a shortfall in transportation fees, but we continue to do well in town clerk fees, conveyance fees, building permits, public safety fees, interestingly enough. So that just leaves us with a slight deficit of about $30,000. In public safety, they started charging for fingerprinting and a couple other things that have brought in some fee revenue through the town. The transfer station will have a surplus as a result of the reduced tonnage that we are collecting. And so that's about $30,000. We are seeing an uptick in waste disposal fees from recycling and bulk waste. So a lot of people are cleaning out their cellars and their basements. Now, one of the changes that has happened since I did this report, just today actually, we had a FEMA brief about a program to report costs related to Storm Isaias, if I can pronounce that right. We had that back in August, and so we've started collecting that information, and we probably spent between debris removal and processing debris and public safety overtime in excess of $200,000, 75% reimbursement. So we're hopeful that those funds will come in before, in order to recognize it in this fiscal year, the funds have to be received by end of August. So we will do our best to 60 days after the close of the year, you have to receive the funds. So we will do our best to get that in on time. So that can have an impact on that. Benefits, that was plus about $160,000, mainly due to lower workers' compensation premiums and savings in health care due to some coverage changes. And so that's good news. And finally, in this report, the Woodbridge Board of Education was at $93,000 for a deficit. They had since reported a deficit of about $69,000. But in the subsequent to that, and Dr. Budd had mentioned that he anticipates covering the entire deficit this year, and they're not anticipating having the deficit at all by the end of the year. So we're hopeful for that. So that could add another, to this number, add another $100,000. Plus, hopefully, we receive the FEMA money, we could be cover the entire $400,000. We do have some snow, obviously, related costs. And some of that should be covered in the department budget, but our contingency is doing well so far, so hopefully we can cover it with our contingency. Those are some of the highlights.
Any questions for Tony on this? Okay. You can all hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay. Woodbridge Board of Ed financial report. Tom, you'll talk about this, right?
Yes. I have to take myself off mute.
Okay. Anything else, Tony, under other?
No other.
So why don't you go into governor's budget update?
So the governor's budget update, which I handed out, which has essentially the summary of the town, which is the shows you impact on the town of Woodbridge, and then just a thorough CCM analysis of some of the governor's highlights, which I thought you'd find helpful. But the focus the thing I wanted to mention on Woodbridge was that we received essentially the exact same amount that we did the current year we will be getting next year. So it's essentially a flat, no decrease, no increase, which we were thankful for.
Okay.
You'll see in there, there's a federal ESSER2 money, which is $101,000 for FY22, and another 101, I think, is for FY23, I believe. So that's 200,000. That goes directly to the Board of Education, and they have specific guidelines that they need to follow in order to use those funds. So unclear if that will have any impact on the operating budget at this time.
Well, thankfully, we don't rely on the state for a lot, and thank God. So some of these towns, they live and die by that, but luckily we're okay with that. So.
Right.
Okay. So really, nothing to impact us at all.
Correct.
Okay. Very good. Any questions on that? How about financial policies update, Tony?
So over the next few months, I'd like to look for a few policies that a lot of these we've been doing all along, but I thought it would be helpful to have them in a policy so that folks can understand how we create the budget and the types of controls we have on the budget. As you know, we have already fund balance policy, a debt policy, we have a purchasing ordinance, which all three of this board has been involved in, particularly the fund balance and the debt policy. And those are sort of two of the main policies that most towns have. What I handed out this evening is, and it's nothing I anticipate you would vote on this evening, but I just wanted to hand it out for your review. They're draft policies. One is on structurally balanced budgeting. One is on reserves, and one is on one-time revenues. And I know that we've discussed the one-time revenue policy before, which is essentially that if you receive a one-time revenue, you should use it for a non-recurring expenditure and not an expenditure that you would have every year. Otherwise, what you create is a situation where the following year you'll have an obligation that you may not be able to afford. So, and we've done that typically when we have one-time revenues. We use them for capital expenditures. One time we received $500,000 from the purchase of the selling of stock from the that we own for the Anthem Cylinder stock, and we used it to purchase the part of the Richmond truck, I believe. Or we used it to fund OPEB, I think what it was. We put it in the OPEB trust. So that's an example of what you can do with the funds. So that's the one-time revenue policy. The structural budgeting is essentially to try to have your budget match your ongoing revenues and your ongoing expenditures. And so you've heard oftentimes you've heard that budgets have a structural issue, and that's when you have an ongoing expenditure and you don't have ongoing revenues to cover it. And so we usually do a good job at this also. So I just thought it would be helpful to have this sort of in a written form. And finally is a reserve policy, which we don't have too many. We have an OPEB reserve, of course, that's our biggest one. But occasionally different reserves come and go. And so I thought it'd be helpful just to have a sort of an idea of how we would create these reserves and how they would be used. If there's any questions, or if anyone has any comments you want to either to me or discuss them, it's totally up to you. I want to do that.
So, Tony, I thought it's great that you're doing this. And the policies look really good. I have to read them in more detail. I just, you know, I have just some like words missing, some little questions, but on the reserve policy,
Yes.
I thought it should start even with a more basic, like, you know, you do it, the first thing is why a reserve policy is important. I would start with what is a reserve, just so it's really
I can do that. Sure.
explained, you know, but I just think it's really good to do this on the big picture, just to, so just like wordsmithing things, I'll get to you, but
Okay.
also in thinking about a policy like this, to be sure that we're not, and I don't think we are, I'm not suggesting it, that we're overly tying our hands, that we're being thoughtful and responsible, but flexible when we need to be.
Understand. I completely understand that. Yes.
Yeah, but thank you for doing
And a lot of these policies are recommendations from government GFOA, Government Finance Officers Association. So a lot of these
Mhm.
policies, which I've gotten, you know, I've worked with GFOA on these. They provide a lot of background and some research in a lot of these. But that's a good point. Some of them, actually, the reserve one was more restrictive, and I took some of the language out. Because their suggested reserve policy had, you know, percents and, you know, it should be at this percent, and then if it goes above that percent, I thought it was a little too restrictive,
Mhm.
to your point. But, okay.
Good, thank you, Tony.
Anything else on the policies update? Okay, let's go to funding requests. The first is a $2,000 line item transfer within the police department to purchase a new printer for the chief's office. I'll move acceptance. The line item transfer 2021-16 in the amount of $2,000.
I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion on this? Pretty self-explanatory. All those in favor, I'll be yes. Ellen? Susan? Tom Handler?
Yes.
Is anybody else here? Tom Kennebec or Paul? No, okay.
Paul.
Oh, Paul? Okay, Paul, you're yes?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I had trouble unmuting.
Okay, okay. All right, next is, we'll have Tony talk about this. It's funding for IT services related to improving cybersecurity resiliency. I'll move acceptance of request for funding 2021-17 in the amount of $9,915.
Second.
Okay, Tony?
We had a cybersecurity review that the state did for us in relation to the election, and it was just a general cybersecurity review. And while I don't want to get into the details, this is to we did well comparison to other communities, but this is to give some of the recommendations to you know, perform some of the recommendations that they had on our cybersecurity profile. So, they had various recommendations for us to tighten up our cybersecurity.
Well, this is certainly important. So, is there any questions or discussion with Tony? Hearing none, I'm yes. Tom Handler?
Yes.
Ellen? You're muted. Susan? Oh, Susan?
Looks like she might have. Oh,
Is that her?
Sounded like her.
She's coming back in.
Okay. How about Paul? How are you? Yes?
Yes.
And Susan, did you hear that? Yes?
Yes,
Okay, we're good. All righty, approval of minutes. We have before us the minutes of our monthly meeting of Thursday, January 21st, 2021, and I'll move acceptance of the minutes of January 21st, 2021 as presented.
Second,
Any discussion, corrections, anything on those?
I have a correction which I forwarded to Karen. The Human Services report was given by me, not by Tom Kennefick, who used to give them.
Okay. All right. Anything else? All those in favor? I'm a yes. Ellen?
Yes.
Yes. Susan?
yes.
Paul?
Yes.
And Tom?
Yes.
Okay. What's next? First Selectmen's report. Beth?
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, good. Okay. Good evening. Thank you, Matt. This past Sunday, February 14th, was our last scheduled free COVID testing event. The town's Human Services Department has done a wonderful job to help get residents age 75 and over get vaccinated. The department reached out to more than 700 residents over the age of 75 to offer help getting a vaccination. Partnering with the QVHD, Human Services held a vaccination clinic here in Woodbridge for over 70 Woodbridge residents, some of the most vulnerable that would have trouble getting to the clinic out of town. They've been able to get other of whom are our town's most valuable citizens vaccinated, as I said. Also, they've sent folks to a testing site in North Haven, where they've been vaccinated, and other places around this area. Our Human Services drivers have worked diligently to get folks to those locations. Now they're working with folks aged 65 to 74 to schedule vaccinations. The dedication helping our residents navigate this stressful, complicated, and frequently changing system has been nothing short of amazing, and I really want to thank them all. Due to the pandemic, Governor Lamont has suspended the reapplication requirement for those residents to take advantage of the Veterans Tax Relief Program and the Elderly Disabled Homeowners Tax Relief Program. Anyone already enrolled in the program will automatically maintain their benefits until the next reapplication year in 2023. Additionally, I've learned that the town budgets $190,000 every year to fund the town Elderly Disabled Homeowners Tax Relief Program, but we only use 70% of it. Details of the program and eligibility requirements are on the town website on the assessor's page. So if you or someone you know might qualify, please take a look. The deadline for new applicants is May 15th. As you know, because you participated in the recent budget presentations, both the Board of Selectmen and Finance have been working diligently on the budget for the coming fiscal year. We have directed departments and commissions to be extra mindful of taxpayer dollars this year due to the financial impacts of the pandemic. Creating the town's budget is a long, as you know, and deliberative process. It would not be possible without input from volunteer board members and commissioners and our town staff. The Board of Selectmen is meeting next Tuesday, February 23rd, to make our recommendations to you. Every time we go through the budget process, it becomes clearer to me that we need to grow and diversify our grant list. We have consolidated staff positions and cut programs. There are very few other ways we can make additional meaningful cuts to the budget without cutting services. So we need to focus on growing revenue. The 2030 Task Force, of which Susan Jacobs is a co-chairman, hello Susan again, thank you for agreeing, is examining how to do that with a goal of having a healthier grant list by 2030. I'll be in the home by then, but that's okay. I could be positive about it. I look forward to hearing their updates and recommendations. Just to let you know, Attorney Aaliyah Alexiadis, one of our citation hearing officers, has moved out of town, and I appointed Attorney Robin Burke as our second hearing officer to replace Aaliyah. She joins the other current officer, Pat Madden. As you all know, the Town Planning Zoning Commission is continuing hearings to consider an application to amend the zoning regs and the Town Plan of Conservation and Development to permit multifamily housing in most of the town's residential districts with affordable cluster-type housing. Because the Board of Selectmen has agreed to have a thoughtful and purposeful approach to having housing opportunities in Woodbridge, Last evening, the board voted unanimously to approve the study charge for the Woodbridge Housing Opportunity Study Committee. The board did approve the establishment of this committee at a previous meeting. Now that we have a charge, the membership of the committee will be established at a later meeting. The charge is posted on the town website attached to our unapproved minutes from last evening. I remain confident that the zoning commission will review the zoning application in a fair, thorough, and thoughtful way and provide an opportunity for all sides to be heard. I am equally confident that Woodbridge will remain a wonderful community that we have all come to love. Lastly, the board scheduled a special meeting for next week prior to our budget meeting to hopefully finalize the proposal for an upcoming bond project, which I have spoken about before. This project will include funding for a new community center at the old firehouse, which has been in need of a decision since a fire in 2006, a storage shed behind the new firehouse to hold all the fire department items that are currently in Bay 1 and Bay 2 at the old firehouse, completion of the renovations to our senior center, which is outdated and desperately in need of upgrades, and the roof replacement and renovations at Beecher Road School. K-wing roof continues to leak every time it rains. With interest rates at an all-time low and reduction in our debt service next year, it is the best time to complete those projects. As you know, they've been pending for many years, so I'll keep you informed of that as we move forward. And with that, thank you, Matt.
Okay, thank you. Okay, liaison reports is our last item. I'll go first with Amity. Well, we had a meeting February 8th, which was last Monday, and this would be for January. The surplus has grown to $576,000, primarily because there are positions that haven't been filled and benefit adjustments of $173,000. So the surplus has grown. At that meeting, obviously, the most discussed item was the budget. If you remember, I believe Amity started out at 5.75%. They brought it down to 3.65%. And Orange, of course, Orange is asking for no more than 0.45%. There's been a lot of bickering going on back and forth. And so the superintendent dropped it from 3.65 down to 2.81, but with the proviso that this 2.81 will require staff cuts and program cuts, and of course that gets everybody's ire up. And there was quite a reaction from the public, which was interesting because the reaction came before I even knew about it, and anybody knew about it. So they put it out to the public and got them all riled up before we even knew about it. So the meeting was, let's just say, testy. Anything in the 2.8, 2.7, 2.5, anything like that is going to, well, they're going after after staff, and a lot of people seem to think there are other things that they can cut. But the talking about staff cuts and program cuts, you get a lot more bang for your buck with those. So it's going to be, we're meeting next Wednesday, and it's going to be a testy meeting because, as I said, Orange will not go above 0.45%, which that's pretty low. And I also get the feeling Bethany is also not going to be looking for a 3.6 or anything like that. I would just like, if you could all just give me, I know it's not easy, do any of you have any feelings as to what the Board of Finance from Woodbridge should say? I'd appreciate anything you feel that's appropriate. So if anybody would like to speak to it, I'd love to hear from you. Tom, go ahead.
I just wonder if you can address, they've been circulating around some of the stuff from the chair of Orange Board of Finance about how their year-over-year massive surpluses, increasing taxes.
Yep.
I wonder if you have any thoughts on what he's been putting forth on that.
Yeah, he's talking about Jim Leahy. He's the vice chair of the. He's always been a proponent of these surpluses. You're taking money from the taxpayers and you're giving it back. But if you didn't take it in the first place, we wouldn't have to raise our taxes as much. And And of course, now what's happened is that the surpluses are becoming more of a target for Amity to use and to put into, now they're saying that they put 1% into the capital non-recurring, which is close to $500,000. And now there's been discussion that they can do 2%, which would be $1 million. Because, I mean, we get this money back, and it's kind of important that when it is not spent that we get it back. But, I mean, his point is well taken. If you don't have, at the end of the year, if you don't have $1 million surplus and your budget was $1 million less, we wouldn't have to raise our taxes as much. And it's been going on for years. I mean, it's been going on for years. And what's troubling to me now, though, is that Amity seems to be more inclined to not give it back. This past year, they did a lot of things with it, and we did get a chunk of money back, but I don't know that this year's surplus will be as much. So I agree with him, but I mean, he's really a numbers guy, and he really crunches them. And I don't know that I agree with him to the extent of a 0.45% increase. So, but you can't argue with the fact that they've had huge surpluses year after year after year. And huge surpluses mean that we've overtaxed our citizens based on their tight budgets every year that they tell us they're having. So, like I said, this year we're already at close to 600,000, and it always grows as the year goes on. So,
Matt,
yes,
I missed this, but do the surpluses occur and recur in identifiable areas in their budget? And that is to say, if we didn't want to give them what they're asking for, what is likely to be cut?
well, one item which I've discussed with all of you many times is this healthcare surplus. They have their own self-insured fund, and they let me see, let me find it. I'll say where we're at with that. Give me a second. Okay. For the current year, they budgeted, they're $694,000. This is through January. They're $694,000 under budget. In other words, they've spent $694,000 less than was budgeted. And so, and again, we've got 5 months to go. I mean, this could be over $1 million. And I pleaded with them last year to cut it. And then on top of it all, as I told you, they one of their consultants told them they should jack up the reserve. So they jacked up the reserve to 30%. Whatever that is. They jacked up the reserve to 30% from 25%, which was another $250,000. And again, I really laced into them on that one because it was voted down by the Finance Committee 4-2. The 3 town members plus 1 board member was against it, and they did it anyway. So, and I told them, look, if you're going to just disregard, when the Finance Committee, and we are an advisory group, but when the Finance Committee comes in 4-2 against it, and you do it anyway, well, why are we wasting our time? Again, we can't force the issue, but why are we wasting our time? And as it turns out, now they tell us that they're taking the $250 out and they're putting it into this year's budget. So again, they basically took $250,000 that could have been returned to the towns. A lot of this stuff becomes salaries where they don't replace people. Special ed they're always in over on special ed. And I think, in putting the budget together, they have this opinion that if they ever came up short, they'd be in trouble because they can't raise any money. And I've reminded them more than once. I'm sure those of us who have been around remember there was a $2 million deficit in the year before the riots began, and they wouldn't approve the budget. And the townspeople paid it. If it's legit. So I really believe when they put this budget together, they had it, and in the feeling that, hey, we can't be right on the button, because if we ever come up short, and that I totally disagree with that. Obviously, if they came up with bona fide reasons as to why the budget was short, the towns would definitely cover that. So those are the main reasons, but it's year after year after year, and
Thank you. Yeah.
the orange contingency is, I think, is basically saying enough.
Well, and I sort of agree with that. I mean, I've been,
Yeah.
you know, we're all supporting of Amity. They've done a great
Yeah.
job, and yet
Yeah.
they keep coming in bigger and bigger surpluses. And now that they seem to be holding more of it back, I'm a little loath to continue to allow them to take that same tack. And so
Yeah.
my suggestion is to, you know, I don't know of a number, but I don't think 0.4 or whatever 0.47 is necessarily reasonable, but I'm not sure I would be happy with, you know, much above 1, just given the past history and what seems to be this trend of holding back more and more money.
Yep,
Can I add to something?
sure.
So, three points. The first is just to take a little bit of issue with what Matt said. The year that Amity had the deficit, it's my recollection that the townspeople or the 3 towns voted down referenda. Am I wrong if I say 12 times?
More than that. I think
No.
18.
18 times.
Yeah.
I think so.
Not because they didn't want to fund the
The 19th, we just,
just because
Attorney
not because they
General
didn't want to fund the system,
Right.
but because they insisted, rightly I believe, that the board resign en masse because
Correct.
they were so frustrated and angry.
Correct.
So the sensitivity about not wanting to return to the town became highly politicized, if you recall.
Mm-hmm.
And in the meantime, program was vulnerable. So I just want to make sure that that memory is there. A few years later, when things kind of settled down, and by the way, I believe that that debacle was the origin of the 3-town advisory finance committee. Am I right about that, Matt?
Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
because it never had that before.
That's how the budget finally passed with that.
Correct. Correct.
But before the referenda were voted down, the townspeople all got a special tax bill and paid the bill. That the resulting voting down of the following year's budget was the issue. This was a current year budget that they were short on. They wouldn't approve the budget until the board resigned. So, but they did pay the shortage from the previous
Right.
year.
So the only thing I'm going to say, so I just want to sort of recharacterize kind of what I think has in part engendered a once burned, twice cautious kind of mentality on the Amity board. And I say that having served on the Amity board after that, and I recall just how edgy the issue about having enough money, not having to return to the town, etc. So that's the context in which I'm going to make this comment, which is, it may well be that from a budgeting style, Amity needs to change its ways so that we don't have this highly uneven kind of surplus ultimately being returned to the town. But I'm very conscious that this year is a year of just chaos in the education systems because of COVID. And this is just, I just don't think this is the year to lower the boom in a way that makes it even harder for school systems to figure out what's happening going forward, because I'm not sure that they can predict what's going forward.
Yeah.
And I think expenses are going to be reflected in that. So that's my input.
Okay. I wish I could say I have a clue how this meeting is going to go. I know Orange is going to vote no, 4 or 5 or no. I don't believe Bethany is going to go for anywhere near, based on letters I've seen, et cetera. I don't think they're going to go anywhere near 3.65%. So, is anybody here tonight willing to say we should give them 3.65? Let's start with that. Anybody? No?
Let me ask you something.
Yeah.
3.5 is a bigger percentage increase for Woodbridge,
Yeah, right.
right? What
Yeah.
would it be for, probably close to 5,
Yeah.
just so that's out there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important that people listening in on this meeting understand that we have a bigger percentage, as Ellen is saying, we have a bigger percentage of Amity students, therefore
Yeah.
our portion of it will be higher.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely.
But in theory, now I don't want to be the person who's taking Amity's side for the sake of taking Amity's side, but in theory, we have a bigger percentage because we have more kids, because more people want to live here. So I don't want to shoot us in the foot for what is potentially an otherwise positive thing. I mean, and I don't have the data on that. I don't know if that's actually true or if that's just viscerally true.
Could I make a comment, Mr. Chairman? I'm not participating in terms of the decision-making part of this, but
Absolutely.
Tony has some interesting data. I hope he still has it related to the town budget versus the school budgets. We are clearly supporters of education. We always have been in Woodbridge, and we need to continue that, obviously. But proportionally, Tony, what are the numbers really, if you have them? If you don't, it's okay.
Roughly,
This is very interesting because our town budget is flat every.
yeah, the first comment I just want to make about the budgeting style is when you get those large revenues each year, it creates sort of a volatility in our revenues because the 600,000, 900,000, 300,000, that's a significant portion of our revenue. So that does create a volatility where one year we may not get it. And, we go from 600,000 to zero would be an issue. In terms of spending, if you look at the expenditures over the last 5 years, so this would be not including the requests from this year. Our town budget, if you break it into 3 parts, right there, you've got the town budget, you've got the Amity budget and the Beecher budget. And I don't have it right in front of me, but I know the town budget is actually lower by about 0.5%. So our budget, that's all the town functions, including the capital, is actually lower from 5 years ago by about 0.5%.
Interesting.
And how did we do that? Well, we eliminated 10 positions to start, or reduced to part-time, and we cut programs. And so and I think the education is maybe 12 and 16% respectively. I think teachers maybe 12 in the 12% range, and Amity's 16% range, thereabouts. Which in and of itself over a 5-year period is, a few percent each year, but when the town is less than it was 5 years ago, I think that's the striking part.
Thank you.
Full presentation on this I'm going to present at one of your next budget meeting.
Well, maybe when we discuss the budget.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'll anybody else want to talk about the Amity budget?
This whole thing about not returning the surplus
Mhm.
as a new development or a new policy really worries me. I think that's very worrisome.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of forces our hand to take action in the other direction.
Good point.
I don't think we have a choice there.
Yeah, it was a very difficult. I mean, I completely changed my my mojo at these meetings because it's just they don't listen. Again, I mean, the board of the finance committee was always set up as a non-binding advisory, but again, when we vote, all 3 towns are saying no. Plus, the former chairman, by the way, was the 4th vote to say no, and then they have a meeting and they barely discuss it. And I said to the superintendent, you should have, knowing that we said no, and your former chairman of the board of ed said no, you should have taken it off the table. This is the 250 to make 30% a 30% reserve for the self-insured medical fund. I said you should have taken it off the table. Well, it's just I believe the board members have a right to vote on it. I said the board members didn't even know what it was about. They just voted yes automatically. Oh, and by the way, at the meeting, the current chairman of the board also voted no, and of course the former chairman and one of our members voted no, and it was like the vote went no, yes, like, and they didn't even discuss it. So, and then again, what's bothering me even more now is they put 250 in to boost it to 30%, which was a complete and utter waste of money, and now they took it out and are using it to fund their budget this year. So basically, they took $250,000 that they should have returned to the towns, and they're playing with it. And again, I agree with Paul. It's troubling that the whole attitude over there has changed about returning this money, and they're looking to keep more and more and give back less and less. And as Tony said, that would be a problem for us. I mean, if you're going to take the money from us and then stick $1 million in the capital and non-recurring fund, that you should be returning to the towns and let us worry about capital through a bond issue or whatever, it is troubling. So I appreciate your comments. I have no idea how this meeting is going to go. I think it's going to be raucous at best, and I'll use my best judgment, and we'll see where we get. But I have a feeling, we could end up in a 3-3 stalemate, and I don't think that can happen. I think sooner or later we've got to agree. But I don't see Amity bringing this thing down to 2%, let's say, or 1%. So I'll use my best judgment, and I'll keep you all posted.
Oh, Matt, I just want to, I appreciate your attention to this and bringing it to us. I can see why you want input. It's a tough position to be in because we are so strongly supportive of Amity and education, but want to be sure we're being responsible about the budget. It's a hard line to follow. So thank you.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you. I'll keep you, as soon as Thursday, look for an email. I'll let you know what happened. Okay, next, let's see, who do we have next here? I see Susan.
Hi. I went to both the library and the fire commission. You know, we might want to make an adjustment in the liaison assignments because I'm a liaison to both, and they meet on the same night.
Oh, okay.
So it was hard enough in person. It's even goofier on Zoom. So anyway, nothing huge to report. I think there was a lot of budget talk. One thing that I think the fire commission brought up that was incredibly interesting is that, and I don't quite know how Sean said it, but on a per call basis, because of COVID, there are just more hours that get devoted to each and every call because of having to, apply all the PPE and cleaning protocols. And it's interesting how it's really boosted their hours in a costly way. The library is using all the imagination it possesses to think about programming going forward. They're hopeful that this summer they may be a little bit more accessible. That's really about it.
Okay. Ellen, anything? You're muted, Ellen.
A report. No. So I was at the Human Services meeting. Just so impressive. All the essentially, I'd like to just incorporate Beth's comment about what Human Services for the COVID side of getting people access, getting people signed up, and in fact, I read a which in some ways was maybe not critical, but contrasting how well vaccinations are going in wealthy Woodbridge compared to others. And I think that's really largely because we have incredible human services departments, and that's doing a great job. So that's the essence of the report. I think they've just been amazing. Thank you.
Okay. Tom?
I unfortunately didn't make the last finance meeting, but I was informed of what was said. I just want to say that I think that Jonathan is doing a really good job of sort of looking into what's been going on at Beecher in the past and really trying to take some creative look at how things are going. I want to, as Tony said, that they really anticipate that they will not have a deficit this year unless things change dramatically. So they're really not sort of resting on their laurels and letting things slide, but they're really looking to how to get, to cut things so that they can come in on budget, which I applaud, especially in the days of COVID. Tony sort of mentioned it in the governor's budget thing, but they're getting, I think, what is it, Tony, 220,000 in ESSER.
202, roughly.
Yeah, it's 200 something. Yeah, and so they are trying to figure out how to use that money, and in particular whether there's a way of using it to, if possible, to sort of reduce their asks so that their budget doesn't go up, and they're being cognizant of the fact that there may be money that would then allow us not to, increase taxes if sort of thinking ahead in terms of how to best use that money legally that would also not, that one thought was just let's pay off all of our deficit, and then we can start fresh. And then they said, well, if we can use it in 22 in a way that allows us to not come back to the town and ask for more money, so that our tax rate doesn't go up. So I just want to applaud them. I think they're doing a really good job, and they're doing, some interesting things to try to really focus on it. So
I couldn't agree with you more. I think Jonathan has hit the ground running, and I think he's doing a terrific job. He's really looked at the budget, and I'm very impressed with his work on the budget. So, Tony, do you know if Ammon got that money? That same money?
They did.
Oh, how much? Could you? I don't need to know right now, but if you can find out how much, shoot it over to me.
Yep.
See what they did with it.
Okay.
Okay. Paul, do you have anything?
Yeah, the Board of Police Commissioners met on the 8th. And really, the only thing of note is that we have a posting for a new deputy chief. The police department seems to be, well, we're all missing Ray, but other than that, we're going along pretty well. The EMS Commission also met the same night. And I'm happy to report that the contract for AMR has been extended another 5 years. The commission is very pleased with their performance, as I've mentioned before. AMR has changed their name to Global Medical Response, so it's now GMR, because I guess they bought some planes or something, so they can be anywhere in the world providing emergency services. And that's about all for police and EMS.
Okay, thank you. Karen, the next meeting when we talk about the budget, is that March 3rd on a Wednesday? Do you have it in front of you? Can't hear you. March 4th? That's a Thursday, I think. I think you're muted, Karen.
Yes, March 4th is the Thursday.
Okay, all right, so that's our next meeting. And that's when we'll decide on, look at the budget after the Board of Selectmen have looked at it. So we'll get a printout of the Board of Selectmen recommendations and go from there, right, Tony?
That's correct.
Okay, anything else? Motion to adjourn? All those in favor? Just yell it out, aye, okay. We'll see you on March 4th. Thank you for all coming.
Yeah. See ya.
Take care.
Bye.
For this thing,